Yesterday was a monumentous day for Canadian filmmakers in general, or the film community, and we got news that the next director of the upcoming Bond film is going to be our very own Denis Villeneuve, who's from the province of Quebec as well, and he is to be the second Canadian to direct a Bond movie in film history. The first one having directed Tomorrow Never Dies. So, Denis Villeneuve posted the following: I grew up watching James Bond films with my father ever since Dr. No with Sean Connery. I'm a diehard Bond fan. To me, he's sacred territory. And then he goes on to say, I intend to honor the tradition and open the path for many new missions to come.
Okay.
This is a massive responsibility, but also incredibly exciting for me and a huge honor.
Okay.
So, what are your thoughts of Denis Villeneuve taking on this mantle after having directed the Dune Part 1, Part 2
Right.
movies and having a series of sci-fi and thrillers under his belt before that, such as Blade Runner, The Arrival, Sicario, and so on?
I'm absolutely thrilled, it's not just my opinion. I remember when my spouse was telling me about Dune, and we watched the Dune movies that were made in the 80s, which I thought were really good. It had Sting in it, and that was my first. I'd never read the books, but he has. And what he brought up was Villeneuve had brought it as close as it could get to the actual storyline, and he absolutely loved it. And so to hear that he is now going to be doing the Bond movies, and he is a thrilled fan that goes back down the ages, and I think he's going to do an excellent job. And my fondest memories of the Bond films with Sean Connery as well. That's what got me. I was hooked forevermore, and I think the best Bond movies that were ever made were during the Cold War. But now I think he's got a lot of material to work with, and I'm looking forward to it, to be honest with you. And I'm honored. I'm very proud to see such an accomplished Canadian that's going to be on this level of the world stage in terms of international film.
As if we weren't already in making headways internationally,
True
right?
enough, I guess. Just add.
So another plus. But one thing I also got to mention is he's currently working on the production phase of Dune 3. Messiah, which is expected to be released at the end of 2026, by the way. And one thing that's a little striking is we've entered a new era in the production stage of the Bond franchise, and that's usually signaled by not just the new director taking the helm, but also the majority of the production team. And obviously, it's very much Denis Villeneuve's team, most likely, that's going to comprise of that new team, incoming team. Let's go back to when Daniel Craig was first chosen to be the next
Yes.
Bond, the uproar that occurred by the
Yes.
public just because he's blonde. I would say blonde-ish, right? And then he actually, till this day, is my favorite Bond. Say what you will about Sean Connery and Pierce Brosnan, he is my favorite Bond. He really upped the ante, and I think it's going to be very difficult for the next successor to play the role.
I agree.
And I think Denis Villeneuve will have, right now the contenders have been for a number of years, Aaron Taylor-Johnson, Theo James. Idris Elba, I don't think he's in the running anymore, but you also have Callum Turner, right? These are the names that were popping up quite a lot. Well, in the upcoming speculation on who's to take the mantle, even MGM held auditions for Aaron Taylor-Johnson. That's been heavily known. But I actually don't think Denis Villeneuve would go with either of them. I think he's going to select someone potentially lesser known, in fact. And at the time, Daniel Craig had done a lot of theater, was in the Elizabeth movie. He had also done Tomb Raider, the first movie with Angelina Jolie, and he also did a dramatic thriller called Layer Cake. And it was, in fact, those two movies that really propelled him to be a frontrunner in terms of the odds of being selected for Bond. But it was also at the time when Martin Campbell was coming back to the Bond franchise after having produced GoldenEye. And then Martin Campbell also was a writing advisor for the script for Quantum of Solace, and we all know how that turned out. So, not in a good way, by the way. So there were like 5 or 6 people writing that screenplay.
Yeah.
It's a sign that it's not going well. So it's very similar to what happened with Casino Royale. It was a rebirth,
Yeah.
a new resurrection of the franchise, similar to what happened with the Dark Knight franchise when Christopher Nolan revived it. You're noticing that similar trend happening with Superman, with James Gunn reviving it. It's going to be in theaters
Oh,
on July 11th,
and
right?
I almost
Fantastic
agree. I mean,
Four.
I've lost track of that one.
Fantastic Four is also coming back,
Again.
having a resurrection. So you're noticing this trend of a lot of rebirths happening in Hollywood, but mainly with Casino Royale, it was a very different style of Bond films where it was much more realistic, much more modern, not just with gadgets that explode with an exploding pen, let's say.
Hey, I love those pens.
No, I'm glad we went back to reality, really. Especially in Skyfall, there were a few jokes made in the catchphrases. Were you expecting an exploding pen? We don't go for those anymore. That was literally the set of lines.
Not exactly Christmas, is it?
Were you expecting an exploding pen? We don't really go in for that anymore.
I remember when Casino Royale came out, though, it was all about Texas Hold'em mainly. And there was this huge rise of Texas Hold'em tournaments. And I remember I was so excited that I even bought, well, smartphones weren't a thing back then, but Sony Ericsson was, the mobile phones. I was one of the first people to have bought it, actually. I do think it's going to be a huge boon. It's not set to come out anytime soon in the next 2 years, from what I know. But I think they're going to go for someone completely outside of the top frontrunners, even though I do think, well, Theo James, I would say no, because he's already done things like Divergent series and also more recently The Gentleman, the TV series. I think they're not going to go for him. They're not. There's been a lot of speculation about Aaron Taylor Johnson, which was exciting. I think. Hey, we both can say it. He is much more attractive than the other options, in my opinion. But
I
I
don't really
also
have
don't know if they're going to go for him.
I don't really have an opinion either way, to be honest with you.
Oh, okay.
I'm not. I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm wondering. I'm leaning more towards. I don't think he's going to choose any of them. I think he might have his own thoughts in mind.
I have a theory though. I
Okay.
think they're definitely still going to stick with a blue-eyed option
I
because
don't really care.
Pierce Brosnan was also blue-eyed.
But going back to what you said, about
Hmm.
the blonde or I don't really care. I'm not
No, but
sure.
there's going to be the same thing happening with the choice again.
Oh, I see what you mean. That there's going to be an outcry no matter who he's choosing. Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. All I can say is good luck to you. This is going to be great either way.
Okay, so we'll take our final break before the last segment. Coming up, when should we have our meetings at work and how often should they be? Coming up right after this.